trapping themselves.
I want to get the people.
Wait, Jeremiah was going to say something.
In verse 3, your explanation of it, you were saying that.
Let me emphasize now.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Paul is definitely speaking about the Jews. This relates entirely to the Jews. But the whole human race is guilty of the same thing. You mean? They're doing their own thing without Yahweh. And there's a lot of people of goodwill that get into politics, try to straighten out the system, sincerely, argue to beat the band, even get in fights, and they don't have the righteousness of Yahweh. Because Yahweh actually says the whole system's got to go and start over again. But they're trying to straighten something up or keep something up that's fallen apart. See? So Paul is strictly speaking of the Jews, that they did this thing, but we see the same thing happening throughout the human history.
It overruns right into everybody.
But can I ask a question then? It's something I had in Romans 11. When it says that Israel failed, is that primarily because they were a type of all mankind?
No, it's not because although men are inclined to do that. They failed because they substituted their own wisdom instead of Yahweh, that's all.
Something any nation as a people would have done, correct? But that's not the point.
Any people who are not Israel, let's say. See, they had the opportunity to have Yahweh's understanding. When Yahweh's understanding is not around, then possibly even Israel would try to straighten things out before they come into the truth, without the truth, They might even try to make some good moves.
Right.
But Israel had Yahweh, and Christendom today will also have Yahweh through us. So the Jews ignored the prophets. They ignored what Yahweh's will was and did their own. And Christendom does the same thing. They ignore what Israel has to say, what Yahweh has to say through Israel, and they're doing their own thing. See? Bye. Bye. So the similarity is I'll recover. The similarity is really there because they are human, they are people. See?
In your explanation of this, you brought out that the Israel of the flesh at that time, they were very confident in what they were doing, and it says, and thought that they did reach out and encompass all righteousness, and that there was nothing else to fulfill, no more to do. What did that mean, nothing else to fulfill?
They're blind. They don't understand. They couldn't see. They didn't know that Yahweh had a plan. There was going to be improvements. There was going to be paradise. They didn't know that.
They just thought they were going to go, that they had everything set up.
An ignorant person says, well, what else can we do? We've got it all now. There's nothing else to do. He has no vision. He can't see any improvement. See? So if they had known, if they had studied the scriptures, clearly they would have seen the prophecies where the people, he'll make a new covenant with people, and where there'll be everlasting blessing.
Right.
They would look at these things.
Yeah, because see, they were thinking that they thought Yahshua was a fraud, right? Is that it? They thought that he was a fraud.
Yeah.
Did they ever think? What did they think would happen? Did they think that he's just going to come off way in the future?
Those that thought he was a fraud didn't really sincerely believe he was a fraud. They were afraid that he was the real thing, and they had to prevent it because these were wicked, and he was taking away their leadership, their positions. He says, look, the whole world is following after him. They didn't want this. See? If they were righteous, they would praise Yahweh because the whole world's following the righteous man, the Messiah, which is where things should be, the way they will be. But these were wicked, so they didn't actually think that.
They just denied him.
They denied it to themselves to get rid of him because he actually impeded or interfered with their ambitions.
Right, because is that how in Genesis it brings out that the kings would depart from Judah? Is that how it goes?
Their scepter should not depart from
From
Judah.
Judah till the coming of the...
Until the shadow comes.
Yeah.
Mm.
See, so that was a threat to them. They knew once he came that they would lose
As
their...
long as it's words, it didn't mean anything. They even preached it. As long as it's words.
What do you mean they even preached it?
They even preached that the Messiah was coming.
Right.
See, as long as it's words. But when he's there, get rid of it.
They didn't like
See?
it.
The same thing with Jews today. They said, well, the prophets are coming back. We'll understand Ezekiel 40 when Elijah comes back. They'll say that. Let Elijah come, they'll fight him. See? Because here's
It's the holiness away from them. The people
Sure.
think they're holy.
And they do. Some of them really do.
So could you say that they thought there was nothing else more to do because when Yahshua comes, he would give them the new instruction. He would give them the plan. And they didn't accept that, and possibly that's why they didn't accept it to the degree because they were so content. They didn't want anything. They didn't want change.
all they thought it was themselves.
Yeah.
If there wasn't any changes to be made, it would be made through them.
Mm-hmm.
See, they were the blessed one. They were the ones that they wanted everybody to look up to themselves. See, so all blessings were coming. That anybody else is going to bring any blessings, he's out. It's completely selfish. See, and these people got to disappear. That's all, because there'll always be problems.
All right. Verse 4. In Goodspeed it says that Yahshua terminates the law and that everyone who has faith may be justified. How did he terminate the law? Was it because he was a perfect man paying the price, for our sins? Was that what made?
Well, there was a law by which they had to abide in order to show that they believed Yahweh, that demonstrates some faith, and this is the only way that Yahweh could be pleased, by demonstration of faith, by obedience. See? So they sacrificed, and they kept the law at the best of their ability. But with the coming of Yahshua, it ended all sacrifices. It ended the law because he was the sacrifice. It ended the commandments and everything else because they couldn't keep them anyhow. The law changed. They were under the law of mercy. So the priesthood was from the tribe of Levi. Now Yahshua was the high priest from the tribe of Judah. So when the high priest is changed, the law changes. Just like when you change your presidency, from Republican to Democrat, the system changes. There's a new king or a new high priest. So this is what Paul brings out. When the high priest is changed, then the law changes. So they're no longer under the written law, no longer under the sacrificial law. You're under the law of mercy. You're under the law of devoting your best, even though imperfect, to obeying. And you'll be forgiven for all of your mistakes where before you were not. Adam was sentenced to death, and Yahweh could not take that back. The day you eat thereof, you will surely die. And die he did, and he would remain dead unless Yahshua died and purchased him and everybody else. Now Yahweh says, well, you belong to him now. He can do as he pleases with you. But as long as Yahweh owned him, he was sentenced to death. But he bought Adam. He bought everybody. So Yahweh let him out. See, you have someone else. You belong to Yahshua now. Now he can give you life. But see, it's not that Yahweh didn't want him to have life. But it's the only way he could be consistent. Because if Yahweh give him life, then you're not true.
Mm-hmm.
He says you're going to die. See?
So the law switched from the Levites, you're saying?
The high priest.
The high priest.
The priesthood, yeah. Which was the law of Israel. They practiced the law, they kept the law, they taught the law.
But when Yahshua came, it switched to Judah.
And he's the high priest, and you're no longer under that law. You're under the law of mercy. See? Although the old law is a schoolmaster to show us what Yahweh really wants.
Mm-hmm.
but you're not held bound to it. You're supposed to do the best you can. And you will improve, and pretty soon you'll be keeping it automatically without even reading it. If you love your neighbors yourself, you'll keep it. You're not harming anybody. You're not doing anything wrong.
Okay, verse 5. Okay, he says, Moses writes that the man who practices the righteousness which is based on the law shall live by it. Okay, the explanation of it was, if man could have made it, he would have lived by the law, but he was proven that he couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they didn't make it because of disobedience, they couldn't live by it, or imperfection.
Well, let's say that the man was already imperfect. He had degenerated into imperfection, and they could not keep it, even if they wanted to. So man was in a fallen condition and facing death. And Yahweh could do nothing about it himself, unless he brought in a redeemer. And whoever was to redeem him had to be perfect, had to be equal to Adam. Because we put a sinful man there that he would not have paid the price. And he would have been willing to die for Adam. Just like a criminal who's sentenced to death. Another man says, I'll die for him. Well, if he dies for him, he takes the whole weight of the guilt. And the criminal goes free. And that's what Yahshua did. He died for everybody. For Adam and everybody else. He purchased us with a price. He died for the sin of Adam. So, in that respect, we're no longer under the condemnation of death. What Yahweh said to Adam no longer holds true. The day you eat the rum, you will surely die. Because he's repurchased, and we belong to Yahshua. So being as because the offspring of Adam was born in sin, they had all the characteristics of Adam, they had no right to life. And they could only be redeemed by a redeemer. In other words, we're all guilty. So he had to give his life. His death had to be forever as a man. Because Adam's death was everlasting. So Yahshua's death would have to be everlasting. So he could never be a man again. The minute he becomes a man, the death sentence is null and void. And we all have to die again.
Yeah.
It's over. His death is going to be. So he could never be a man again, right? That means he would take the sacrifice back.
Can I ask you something? Chuck told me, I wasn't at the meeting Tuesday night. He told me that you said that even if Israel, imperfect as they were, if they would have been sincere in their sacrifices, they would have been blessed. This would have been acceptable.
Oh yeah. There wouldn't have been the disasters, the wars, the annihilations that they had. The enemies come up against them and destroy it. Where they were starving, eating pigeon manure, and selling it at a high price.
But it couldn't have been that way, though. Or else couldn't you say Yahweh's plan wouldn't have been fulfilled?
It couldn't have been that way because we're dealing with men as they are.
Right, men as they are.
And that's the way it has to come out.
Right.
See?
So we're saying ideally, if they would have...
If it was all prophets, let's say, all obedient ones, but they're rare. If they've been all obedient, these things would never happen. We would never allow them to be overrun like that. But the majority were disobedient. Now it had to be the way it had to be. That's all.
Yeah.
It's the only way it could be.
Okay. Let's see. Now in verse 6 and 7, it says, "But do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that is to bring down Christ, or who will descend into the abyss, that is to bring Christ up from the dead." Okay. Is he referring to how the Christians look for miracles and that Yahshua would come down out of the heavens, out of the clouds, how they say that would happen. Is he saying, like, don't look for something like that?
What does Jeremiah say, doesn't he?
No.
I know that.
First of all, it's read from the Jerusalem Bible. Jeremiah reads it from Jerusalem. Do not tell yourselves you have to bring Christ down, as in the text, or who will go up to heaven, or that you have to bring Christ back from the dead, as in the text, who will go down to the underworld. So what's being said here is that this doesn't have to happen in order for you to gain an understanding. You
Right.
brought out, and that it's not something that has to be hunted for or searched for. It's right here.
Right, the
You know.
truth is here now.
Uh-huh. But the thing is, you know how Christianity, is he like in a way implying, putting this towards Christianity who says that they have to see this miracle of Yahshua coming down out of heaven? Is that directed towards them, or is this a statement he's just making?
Well, but the righteousness is based on faith. Moses writes that the man who practices righteousness, which is based on the law, shall live by it, okay, if he was able to do it. But the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that is to bring Christ down, or who will descend into the abyss, that is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what it does say, the word is near you, on your lips and in your heart. That is the word of faith which we preach. Okay? Let's see. Who will ascend into heaven? The way this is worded is a little confusing.
See, is he saying it to like, because you know how Christianity, they're always trying to say that Yahshua is going to do some miraculous thing, and that's how, you know, and here,
Oh. Well, in other words, you don't actually have to have him come down. You don't have to actually see this or resurrect him or do anything to get all the proof, to be convinced. See, what you have to do, but what does it say? The word is near you, on your lips and in your heart. That is the word of faith which we preach. Now, all you have to do, because if you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's all you need, the faith that actually that these things actually took place. You don't have to bring him up or resurrect him or see him or anything else. See? So you actually have to have faith that these things did transpire, and if you firmly believe, you will be saved. Now, the Christians, they play on this, you know. They use this as a whole Bible. They believe in your heart that God raised him, well, because if you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord, okay, see, they stop there, you know, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, see, you will be saved, so you don't have to do anything else. But if you do believe this, and you're Israel, you understand that the promises of Israel will be fulfilled through him, because he's the Messiah. See? If these things did happen, if Yahweh did raise him from the dead, then he's going to proceed and reestablish Israel and bring back the kingdom and bring back the blessings on earth. See, he's going to fulfill everything that Yahweh promised. So it's not just believing that he came, you know, like the Christians. They know nothing about the promise. They say they believe. Like a Christian last night. I said, don't let me hear you say another time that we don't believe in the Messiah. I says, we believe in the Messiah, you don't. He says, that settles it. Says, he answered my question, he left.
Yeah.
But that's the truth. They do not believe.
So, is this directed towards them, though, Christians?
Oh. As far as the...
or was it directed towards Israel, the flesh, in Paul's time? Because surely it's not us, right? We know. We
No.
all accept it. And
No. Well, I would say the Christians they're not looking for anything. They're not even looking for a miracle. Yahshua says even if you raise the dead, they wouldn't believe. See? So this would not fulfill the Christians because they're not looking for anything. They're not looking for a miracle. They just got their mind made up. They're going to heaven. See? They have Yahshua. They actually act as though they have him in their clutches.
Yeah.
And he can't get away. See, they got him. And they're going to receive the blessing. They pronounce their own blessings. So in a way, they're doing their own thing like the Jews did. They established their own righteousness. They even teaching Yahshua what to do, telling him what to do. See? Because they says they have him, and he's gonna resurrect them into the heavens. And this they have no authority to say that.
Literally, what is he saying here? Do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven? Meaning that they're trying to say in their heart that somebody has to go to the heavens to make the connection so that they can understand, or somebody has to raise them up in the dead to make a connection.
As though it wasn't real, there would be a connection.
Yeah.
See, or to raise him up from the dead to speak to him and see him. See, it's all you need is that the word of faith. That he was here. Right. The word is near on your lips and your heart. That is the word of faith which we preach. Because if you confess, if you believe it, so if you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. See, that's all you need. You don't need any of these miracles. You don't have to make direct contact. People, see, there's agnostics. An agnostic doesn't believes that there is absolutely no proof that there's a God, and there's nothing that you can prove that there isn't. There just is no way at all that you can find out or to prove it or disprove it. See? And that there's any, they also say there's no proof that there's life hereafter. See? And no proof that there isn't. See? So they just take the middle road and forget everything. See?
The easiest way out.
Yeah. See? But we, through knowing Yahweh, that he's a just God, a loving God, when we read his word, we believe it. We know he wouldn't lie to us. So whatever he says, we believe firmly, without proof, without miracles, without anything. We believe and we are saved. See? In fact, blessed are those who believe without seeing. See? Because we know that Yahweh is honorable. He's not lying to us.
So Paul was trying to tell Israel the flesh was back then, but it just didn't sink in.
Right. And the reason he mentioned Yahshua so much there, believing in Yahshua, he should be saved, because that was the crucial point. Did he come or didn't he?
Right.
Was he the Messiah or wasn't he? That was a crucial point.
Yeah.
Today everybody's heard of Yahshua, heard of the Messiah.
Right.
And it's no longer an issue. Did he come or did he come? Although a lot of people still don't believe anything at all. But with Israel there, they said it wasn't him. Okay?
I just can't believe there's so
and
many.
What it did separate, it separated the Israel of flesh, who says he didn't come, with the true Israel, who accepted him. Mm-hmm. The apostles were the true Israel.
Right.
They saw Yahweh's progress with Israel continue, and he brought them the Messiah, and they accepted him, and they knew that Israel had moved forward. The others stayed back.
And what was the minority?
Huh?
The ones who believed were the minority?
Yeah.
They were the minority.
Absolutely.
So those who said he didn't come, naturally when the truth died out, tradition just said that he never came, and today that's what you have. They just don't.
It's incredible. There's so many Jews that don't accept Yahshua.
Don't accept that.
There's a lot of them. I mean, there's many of them who are, as there are Christians who are deceived by Satan. You know, I think that's a lot of people to just. They're just really.
But they haven't heard the truth either. They certainly don't fall for Christianity.
Right.
So they'd rather be without a Messiah than believe in Christianity.
You know, I was speaking to Jews in Canada.
Yeah.
They liked me.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. They had invited me to a party. All those who were studying Hebrew. I never got anything out of the Hebrew there. But they took me there, and lo and behold, there was a minister there. He was studying Hebrew. And he began blabbing off. And I said to myself, I'm not going to get involved with him. I was so tired of arguing with these guys.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, he gets in Daniel 2. And I smashed him.
Did you really?
Then he got in Revelation 9, my two favorites.
Yeah.
Woo!
Oh boy.
And boy, he shut up, and the Jew says, "What's the matter?" I don't know what his name is, Steve or something. Too much for you? Is into the river. In other words, you got no answers. But they were all for me. And another, the teacher says, "Well, Aryeh doesn't say that. You know, he's different than you." They called me Aryeh, and so they were taking a side against him.
Wow, that's really
They
nice.
liked me.
Well, he was a Christian. He was a Christian or something like that.
Yeah, he was a Christian minister, right?
And they were Jews.
They were Jews,
Wow.
and the Jews were on my side. They really liked me,
Yeah.
and I felt such a closeness, like Yahweh was restoring Israel the flesh back. They're going to come in. You know?
Yeah.
They're going to come in by the millions. When they see the sense it makes, you know, they're not confused with all this Christianity, Trinity, and all this stuff
Mhm.
that the Christians threw in there. They're not.
They don't
at
go
all.
for it at all.
All they have is one God, and they're looking for a Messiah. When they understand through the knowledge we give them that He has come,
Right.
they'll be coming in.
It's really something how they don't believe right now.
But you'll have some real opponents, the same as Joshua had.
Yeah.
From the Jews, the really rich.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know it's like the ones that get really mad.
The richness really doesn't make it. Yeah, it doesn't matter that much
Right.
because we're going to have some of the strangers who are really rich and big shots come in. See, they're righteous people. They do the best they can in this world. When they actually see that there is a plan, they come in, bring everything they got with them. See, the most noble will actually come in, and that's what's going to hurt the world something so drastically, because they're going to lose their most noble people in the strangers, and that's about 1/3 of your population. So they're going to get it. They're going to get a real slack. This is why it's one of the woes to the world.
Mhm.
The 1/3 comes over.
It's gonna really rock them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, verse 11.
Yeah.
No one who believes in him will be put to shame.
Mm-hmm.
I have a scriptural reference. I want to know if it can be used.
Blessed is he whose mind is stayed on him. Stays on your way. Trust in your way. Now to be put to shame.
Well, here's the thing. I understand that. I want to ask you if I can use a reference that Joe
Okay.
brought out.
Okay.
In Revelation 16:15, lo, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is he who is awake, keeping his garments, that he may not go naked and be seen exposed.
There's actually,
By lacking the understanding, is that what the nakedness means? Not having the proper knowledge to.
well, he'll be exposed as being a fool, a stupid, a man who's neglected to do what is right, something to be ashamed of. Really, yes. A man naked is ashamed. Okay, something to be ashamed of. In other words, he hasn't done the right thing. He's done the wrong thing. He hasn't searched. He hasn't found the truth, and he's still in ignorance, in the dark. Okay. This is actually referring to anyone who, giving hope to anyone who starts to study. No one who believes in him will be put to shame. In other words, you're not going to end up in a dead-end street by studying the scriptures or having putting your trust in your way. See, like others do. This is not a chance thing. In other words, if you follow through, your way will remain with you and you'll receive his blessings. You're not going to end up with nothing, no fulfillment.
So.
You can use that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
You
use
think
it,
I
but
can?
try to explain them.
But that pertains more to the end days, the day of
Well,
judgment.
then maybe
Yeah.
I
That
won't.
scripture there.
Maybe I won't then.
It's not exactly fitting.
Okay.
Right.
Joe mentioned it, and I thought, well, gee, maybe I should. I didn't know for sure. Okay. In verse, I have questions on so many verses, things that I figured I could have asked other people, but I thought I'd just ask you, so it'd be the easiest thing to do. In verse 12, for there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, and the same Lord is Lord of all, who bestows his riches upon all who call upon him. About in Romans 9, 6 through 8, when he's talking about there's no distinction between Jew and Greek.
Why is it the Israel flesh, not the Israel God? It's
Uh-huh.
Israel promise.
But let's see, what did I want to ask? When it's speaking of Isaac, through Isaac shall your descendants be named. So Isaac pictures Yahshua strictly because of Abraham when he was going to sacrifice Isaac, and
No, because of all the promises that Yahweh made to Abraham. Yeah.
Through his seed.
In thy seed will all the blessing, will all the nations of the earth be blessed.
So that's why Yahshua and Isaac
Right.
were so common.
Right. Yes, sir. He was a promised seed, and he came alone, and he came very late. Israel waited a long time for him. Yeah. So that's another way of saying that through Yahshua will your seed be called. That means true Israel would be called by Yahshua and accept Yahshua. See, like the apostles accepted him. They're true Israel. And everybody who accepts Yahshua and is part of 200 million is Israel. So there's no distinction between a Gentile and a Jew he's bringing out here. It's really, he knows respect of persons. He shows no partiality. And as Paul brings out in Romans 9, that there's an Israel of promise. The Israel of flesh is not the Israel of God. Now you want to explain this, that the Israel under the law is not the Israel of God. That doesn't mean that every Jew alive is not the Israel of God.
Right.
See, the way it sounds is like the Jews are out. But the Jews of old, the Jews under the law, the Jews who did not accept the Messiah, the old organization, those who steadfastly adhere to it, are not the Israel of God.
Mm-hmm. That comes in my study pretty much.
Yeah.
Romans 11 had to be brought out.
Okay. I know if I use that scriptural reference, I wanted to have that clear about Isaac in my mind. I wanted to be positive.
Yeah. In other words, you could very safely, substitute in Yahshua will thy seed be called. This is what he's saying. That he's using the symbol of Isaac to throw off so-called wise men.
Verse 14. But how are men to call upon him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without a preacher? Here's my question. You know how it says, and how are they to believe in him? Who's they?
Anybody that is supposed to come in. See? All right, now.
I see.
Where are you reading now?
Verse 14.
14. Okay.
They is.
But how are men to call upon him in whom they have not believed? Okay, they don't believe. How are they going to call? If you don't believe somebody exists, you're going to call out Tony or John. If you don't believe he exists, if you don't,
Yeah.
you're only going to call who you know. Well, they don't believe. They don't know. See? Right? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? Okay, never heard of him. How are they to hear without a preacher? All right, now that means somebody's got to tell them about it. And the one who tells them is a preacher. See, because he's using the word of Yahweh. And how can men preach unless they are sent? So anybody who becomes a preacher, there's guys that send over to Los Angeles and get a license for $2. They become an ordained minister.
Right.
But Paul isn't referring to those guys. He says they got to be sent. So who are sent? See? It's Israel that is sent. Because that's the ones that Yahweh is using. And they're the ones that are gaining the understanding and making use of it and prospering and flourishing and growing in the understanding. See? So first he actually sends the prophets, and then he sends all of Israel. They're all sent. But the Christians are not sent. So this is where the devil comes in. He has these Christians verify, vow that God called them and sent him on a mission. Told him to become a missionary, or said that he should begin to preach the word.
Oh, boy.
So they deceive the people because the people can't distinguish true godliness from false. See, because they're not experts. But if their heart is right, Israel will make it clear to them and they'll understand. If they won't understand, they will understand. They'll have the opportunity. Is that clear?
Uh-huh.
All right.
Yeah. Verse 15.
Was that 15 or 16?
15.
15.
It sort of follows right after the first part of it. And how can men preach unless they are sent? You brought that up. But then it says, as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach good news. Now,
That's supposed to be how beautiful are the feet of him.
Of him, right.
Who preach good news.
What translation is that?
Well, this is from the Hebrew. He takes it from the Hebrew.
I see. All right. So it's, there is no real translation that says that. You just know from the Hebrew.
The Hebrew, that's where it was first recorded. See, now the reason he says how beautiful are the feet of him who preach good news, because they are actually selected by him. Yahshua selected his own body members and sent them out. These are not Christians, these are not Muslims or anything else. These are selected by him, and they had the understanding, and they were going from throughout the world, who say to the mountain, thy God reigneth. They were preaching to everybody that the kingdom has begun. Yahshua is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent. See, they were saying these things. That's the remnant.
The remnant. Did Paul have any idea this was the remnant when he was writing this? Did he know that? So in no way it couldn't have been the apostles, right?
He was quoting from Isaiah, right?
He was quoting from Isaiah.
Isaiah.
Yeah.
So it was, but I wonder if Paul knew that this was the remnant he was writing about.
Well, when he read it, he said, how beautiful are the feet of him. I'm just trying to think if he ever made mention of the body. We are the body. Yeah, he probably knew that.
Yeah. I was curious.
Did he think
He
that
said
they
the
were
body
the
has
remnant?
many members, right? And everybody has different positions. Yes, he knew that.
Did he think that he was the remnant, that they were the remnant that was preaching? In Romans 11, he brings out remnant again, but though there is a remnant left,
Well,
I believe
the remains of Israel.
the remains of Israel, the remains.
As far as who they were, he knew that they were part of the body.
Right.
Whether he knew any more, it's debatable.
Right.
It's something how many questions you come up with when you're studying something. You know what happens is I start thinking, well, I have to ask myself every question about each verse, because if I get up there and somebody springs one on me I didn't think about.
Yeah, but you got two others to help you, but you still should be well prepared.
Yeah, right. So anyway,
You got two others that don't know anything else.
they sit behind me and smile the whole time.
Who's that?
They just will sit there behind me and smile the whole time. Russell and Nicole. Nicole can crack jokes. I remember Russell saying jokes all the time. But the thing is, so that's how it fits in here. Paul's talking about how beautiful all of this is, and he goes into the fact that
these are chosen. They're body members and they're chosen by Yahshua. So this is where he's distinguishing those who are selected and those who are just preaching on their own.
Right.
Here's a class
There's
of selected.
a comparison.
So the main point when he says, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach good news, how beautiful are the feet of him who preach good news, or good tidings, I don't know what translation, is that the feet shows that they're definitely part of the body, meaning that they're definitely sent. This is the indication that they're sent.
Right. And he says we are the body. Right.
So the word feet really gives you the indication that it means that they're sent.
It's all part of the same godly organization. And it's so much different than what the world is trying to present.
Yeah, these Christians pop up, they're not part of anything.
Oh, they're nickel and dime. We watched one on TV the other night. He was such a hick, like a southern hick. His vocabulary was horrible.
Yeah, they talk with a lot of slang.
Yeah, and he was the level of intelligence he was operating on was so offensive. We couldn't believe he was on television doing it. But he did, and there were lots of people there listening to him.
Okay, so faith comes from what is heard, and what is heard comes by preaching of Christ. But if you preach, they have to be sent. It's not everybody that preaches the truth. So this is where the confusion comes in.
Okay. In verse 16, but they have not all heeded the gospel, for Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed what he has heard from us?
Who has believed our report?
Who has believed what he has heard from us? I think what I wanted to know was who are the people that he's asking that about? Who believed? Like, is he saying...
Isaiah prophesied that the time would come when they would not believe. Paul is living it that day. He's had more rejections than an acceptance. So he's saying that Isaiah's words are fulfilled then. Who has believed our report?
Is it more like, has anybody believed us? Is it more like that?
Well, it's close to that. See, it's probably completely rejected. Practically completely rejected.
How about that? Okay, and on this tape, you read 16, 17, and 18 together. Was there any real reason for it? Can they be read separately? Should I make sure I read them all together?
16, 17, and 18?
Yeah.
Well, it's really, you've covered 17, so you can read right over it. But they have not, 16, but they have not. But they have not all indeed heeded the gospel. But that's explained, isn't it? For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed what he has heard from us. Is that explained?
I'm not sure. What do you mean, is that explained?
Well, did I explain 16?
Yeah, you explained 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then...
you explained it in that because it was the question. Paul was kind of quoting Isaiah and saying, well, has anybody even believed what we've said?
So you can read 16 and explain it. Then you go on to 17 and 18 together. See, so faith comes from what is heard, and what is heard comes by preaching of Christ.
Right. But I asked,
have they not heard? Indeed, they have. For their voice has gone out to all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world.
In verse 18, okay, their voice has gone out to all the ends of the world. Their voice, the body's voice.
They did a lot of preaching, though. They went to Rome, they went to all of Greece, they went all around the Mediterranean, and practically the known world.
The early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, is that when it was, when the remnant was?
No, I'm speaking about Paul. They went practically all over.
Wow. See,
when the nation of Rome heard about it, that encompassed practically the whole world. And everybody talked about it, and so they got a lot of publicity. In fact, they gathered a major part of the 144,000.
I see. You know why I asked that is because when it's speaking in 15 about the remnant, that's what. Okay, so this is.
It had such an effect that even it turned into the Catholic Church, and that was world. Had really spread tremendously. We haven't had anything compared to what they had. It turned into the Catholic Church, and that was worldwide practically. And that's where Constantine started to twist everything up and got to what the true believers and mingled them in with the false ones and developed a false religion. See? So that the truth had really spread tremendously, and they feared them. See, they had we haven't had anything compared to what they had or what Russell has had. But the way is that when he gives them a shot this time, it's going to be thorough. That's why we have to learn it all. And when we start, there's no coming back, there's no turning back. And we're going to have all the answers, and the world is going to be amazed. It's not going to be a Christian religion where you're going to have a lot of questions unanswered. They'll be all answered. And their own system will be completely exposed.
So this was one in Paul's time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have one more question. In verse 20. Then Isaiah is bold as to say, I have been found by those who did not seek me, and I have shown my face to those who did not ask for me.
These two should be used together, 19 and 20.
And 20?
19 and 20.
Okay.
Again, I asked, did Israel not understand? First, Moses says, I will make you jealous of those who are not a nation. Well, who is that?
Israel, right? Us.
Well, yeah, it'll become it, but that's the Gentiles.
The Gentiles.
They were not a nation. He's
Right.
going to get them in
Okay.
and use them, and they'll obey where you didn't. In other words, okay.
Where the Israel of the flesh didn't.
Right.
Okay. But that's us, right? If we make up the Gentiles.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, because I asked you that the other night. And
With
then,
a foolish nation I will make you angry. Then Isaiah so bold as to say, I have been found by those who did not seek me. That's again the Gentiles.
Mhm.
I have shown myself to those who did not ask for me.
okay.
So he compares them with Israel. But if Israel says, all day long I've held out my hands to a disobedient, contrary people. So they had all the opportunity, they disobeyed, and here's people not even asking for them. When they hear it, they respond.
When did the Gentiles begin to seek? In Paul's time?
Absolutely.
Once Joshua came?
Absolutely. Paul said,
Okay.
blindness in part has fallen upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles come in, then all Israel shall be saved.
Okay, so the Gentiles started to believe or seek in Paul's time.
Right.
Okay.
Remember the first one, it was an Italian who came in? The race for
That's a joke. Come on, that's a joke. All right.
That's the,
Okay, so now.
but really, a Gentile. He was a Gentile. So.
And what that even be? The Gentiles. They started listening to the apostles.
Right.
All right. Okay, I'm set.
They used to get a lot of, in other words, they used to get a lot of information from Israel and all, and they got involved in the publicity about the Messiah. Some of them heard the miracles, saw the miracles, and there must have been a lot of talking. See, so with the publicity, it's going to be the same thing. People will be talking by themselves without even us there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like anything you see on the news. This trivial
People are
stuff
talking.
on the news you see. Can you imagine when this happens?
So they'll be talking by themselves, and they'll be spreading it themselves without even our help.
Right?
See, that's when the publicity is really rolling. Everybody be talking about it. Yeah.
Back then, it must have been hard to carry a message, though.
Yeah.
No phones, no radio,
Yeah.
no television,
They
and yet
sent
it
letters
still
and
went a while.
took weeks and months to get there through ships, sailing ships and all.
Hmm.
Paul used to write letters, but they took a long time to get there.
Imagine a lot of the second, third, fifth-hand information you got, how messed up it could get.
Oh boy.
I mean, how did you get the word straight, back then?
And that's why Paul used to enlist the congregations and straighten them out.
Yeah.
Because there'd be people to come up with new theories,
Right.
all the time. Satan was in there all the time.
Yeah, especially then.
It's busy.
Yeah, we see the effect he's going to have now. He's always working.
I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more questions. In fact, I haven't even studied all the way through this yet, but I'm going to give you what I have. All right, I had a question in verse 5, but I think you answered it. It says, so too at the present time there is a remnant chosen by grace. Now, the remnant just means those who are left out of Israel, the obedient ones. And verse 6, but if it is by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works, otherwise grace would no longer be grace. So is he saying primarily the basis of works meaning the law?
Absolutely. Because a man is saved by his works. Meaning, does he work for the kingdom? Does he do anything? Does he demonstrate his faith? Show me your faith without your works, and I'll show you my faith with my works.
Right.
See? So you have to work. But the works of the law, that is not what's going to save him. He can sacrifice all he wants. He keep the Sabbath and everything else. The Yahweh has made a new preparation, and it is the new covenant under Yahshua. This is what you follow.
Seems with this study, every time you can bring out the point about the Israel of the flesh and Paul's writing this at the moment, you always have to reflect on the end days, like now, situation now. It seems that you do. In fact, sometimes you don't even explain the first, you could say, understanding of why Paul wrote what he did for Israel. You go right into the end days.
Well, it was the same thing.
Right, it's the same thing.
In other words, they as soon as they accepted Yahshua, they accepted the covenant. We have to do the same thing today.
Right.
Same move. So regardless how long it is.
So to be thorough with the study, should you always bring out both points
You
for
can.
clarity, for
It'd
understanding?
be better, but you got to mention the same thing today.
Right.
And what ends up happening is, chances are somebody's going to ask you if you
Right.
don't bring it out.
But it seems to help with clarity if you do bring out
Yeah.
why Paul wrote it in this instance and how it applies today.
Well, I jump because immediately my mind
Right.
sees a similarity of situation.
Right.
And it's almost like for you, in your mind, it almost goes without, to a degree, it goes without saying sometimes that,
Yeah.
sure, it had a purpose back then, but it has a better, even a bigger one now. But still, everyone does end up wondering.
Verse 7. What then? Israel failed to obtain what it sought? The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. Now I have two questions. The part that says Israel failed to obtain what it sought, meaning what?
Well, they wanted Yahweh's blessing. But when they didn't accept what Yahweh had provided, they lost it. So they went on with what they thought was right. In fact, Paul was so convinced he was killing he was arresting the believers before before his eyes were open.
Mm-hmm.
So they went their own way and they lost it. If they were sincere, then Yahweh would have opened up their eyes.
How did you always shock Paul into seeing the truth?
He actually called them out. Yahshua called them out and spoke to them.
Yeah.
But they knew his heart was right, see, so they didn't go by his activities actually proved how sincere he was, and he thought he was right.
Yeah.
And he was ready to punish him. See, this is what we got to be careful of, too. We find sincere people who are ready to destroy us because they're so convinced that they're right. But that's going to be, primarily, that's going to come in from ignorance, through ignorance, like the Catholics who believe they're right. If you say something against the Catholics, you know.
Oh boy.
Does that fit in with your scripture? They have a zeal for God, but it is unenlightened. It is not enlightened.
Without understanding.
I mean, like Paul himself, you could say had a zeal, but it was unenlightened.
Right. Because he thought his zeal was a righteous one, but it was man's sense of righteousness and not Yahweh's.
Yeah, where is that now?
That's in 10.
Yeah.
Back in 10, yeah. It was verse 2 and verse 2.
Yeah, I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but it is not enlightened at the great time.
Yeah.
All right, so they didn't have. Well, let's say that they weren't using all their faculties. They should have known that something was wrong. Here they had answers, and they rejected the answers, and they went on to what was not satisfying. They stuck to that. It's stupid. But like children, you expect them to do stupid things. You know? And that's how they were.
We do that sometimes. The lesson we're supposed to be learning is right in front of our faces, but, you know, we're kind of just really, you know what I mean, on a small scale, like you're learning a lesson. It's almost right there, but it's almost like you're stupid or something. You don't see it until someone else has to show you it right in front of your face, you know.
Yeah. So then we're on 7.
Now Chuck brought out to me that when he gave the study, he asked you about that. And he brought out to me that Israel failed to obtain what it sought, meaning they failed to build the kingdom.
Well,
Is that...
they didn't have authority to build a kingdom without Yahshua. They failed they wanted Yahweh's blessing primarily. But because they didn't follow through with everything that Yahweh, the different steps that Yahweh provided to obtain that blessing, they lost it.
Mm-hmm. Meaning
That they used their own head and ignored what Yahweh was doing. When he brought the Messiah, that's the whole fulfillment. That's the whole fulcrum, the turning point. When they rejected him, they lost everything.
Right. Now it says here, the elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. How do you explain hardened?
Well,
a few words or
when they rejected, hardened can come from a lot of reasons. It can come from guilt. In a way, they know they're wrong, so they got to find proof that they're right. And they begin to get adamant. They begin to get violent. They begin to get angry. They become defensive. Rebel, and they become real enemies because either they don't want it, or they are ashamed of themselves for not finding it in the first place. But the elect, the ones whom he chose, the one whom Yahweh blessed, and blessed them because their heart is right, the ones who were willing to make the change, the ones who were willing to admit that they were wrong, that Yahweh is now showing them something else, the teachable, the meek, obtained it. But the ones who rejected it, they even were in a worse condition than they were before. So not only did they didn't understand, they began to find reasons to fight it, which is bad. In other words, they had an issue now. They didn't have the issue before. Now that they have an issue, they turned against it and found all they could to fight against it. This made it hard.
So could you say at this particular verse we're talking about the rebellion because of Yahshua? This is why they're hardened? Or could this verse refer to Israel, with the prophets also?
It happens all the time.
With
Yahshua was what Paul was speaking about.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to experience the same thing. See, people who didn't give a darn about religion or anything, when they see us making success, they're going to become violent enemies. Yeah. They reject it, and they're going to fight it. And the reason they fight it, the reason they become hardened, because Yahweh removes His Spirit from them. He really removes the Spirit because their attitude is wrong. They don't deserve it.
So they're looking for an excuse, right?
Right. Now look, they'll understand. They're looking for an excuse.
Yeah. Okay. Now in verse 9, he quotes.
He says, look at 8. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that should not see, and ears that should not hear, down to this very day.
Right.
So he said, because they were fighting it, the Spirit was removed completely. All right, 9.
But if they're non-believers, if they don't, how do they have the Spirit? Are you saying that they hear, they understand because of Yahweh's Spirit, and then they fight it, and therefore it's removed altogether?
No. This is the ones that understand it. These are the ones that who reject it. These are the ones who will be sent to the second death.
Right. I want to understand.
Yeah. The others. The others, apparently, the message never did get through to them.
But they're still what you would say ignorant, or
they're ignorant.
They become hardened,
right?
Even though it never really penetrated.
Yeah, they really didn't look into it deep enough to really see that it's right. But what they did, they defended themselves why they shouldn't, because probably it was inconvenient to them to understand it. Yeah, we'd have to change their way of life. Like Kleiner says, he said, I'd have to give up my whole judgeship. He couldn't do that. Not for your way. So 9 says, and David says, let their feast become a snare and a trap, a pitfall and a retribution for them.
Now the Revised says, let their table become a snare.
Mm-hmm.
You read everything out of the Revised in this study, so I don't know which is best.
Yeah, well, if I looked at the Hebrew, it probably would say table.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where the feast is.
So if you want to explain that. He's quoting from Psalms, I think, 69. I was even wondering if I should go back to that and see if there's more understanding there.
Psalm 69, what?
Yeah, 22 to 28. It's a lot added there. Let their sacrificial, let's say, let their sacrificial feasts be a trap.
69, 22.
Yeah.
At their tables. Okay.
Are you reading out? What are you reading out of? Leasers?
No, this is the authorized.
In Hebrew too.
Yeah.
Are you reading that in Hebrew? He's reading in Hebrew. I thought it had the English underneath it. He's reading Hebrew.
Tables. It's tables, yeah. They got the wrong number there. Okay. Well, what do you want to know now? In other words, that their tables, well, the table something you feed off. This is where they get the spiritual food. Let the spiritual food become a snare to them.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, give them blood to drink, for they deserve it. See, that all harmonizes. So they get in other words, the spiritual food that they do get is wrong, and it becomes a snare and a trap.
Right. Okay. And bend their backs forever, verse 10.
They cannot see and bend their backs forever. Well, meaning that they're ever working, ever learning, and never come to the knowledge of the truth.
Yeah.
Never get anywhere by it.
Meaning always laboring, always
Yeah.
working.
Right.
Okay.
I said working, not physical work.
Right.
This is in other words, always trying to get fulfillment from where there is no fulfillment, and they'll never get it. They'll continue to work forever and never get anywhere.
Applying themselves to doing it, but not ever getting it.
Okay. Now, in verse 11, it says, "So I asked them, have they stumbled so as to fall? By no means, but through their trespass salvation has come to the Gentiles as to make Israel jealous."
So that's to make Israel jealous.
Now, when he says jealous there, is that the same jealous as I will make you jealous of another nation, of another people?
Right, to make them jealous so that they would wish they had what we have.
Right.
See, everybody would like to be a Jew because they were the Lord's people. They were blessed. Now they're going to want to be like us because we're blessed.
Mm-hmm.
Jealous.
Now, Paul says in 14, in order to make my fellow Jews jealous and thus save some of them.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm speaking to you Gentiles. So that's the same thing, the jealousy.
Right.
Even as far back as Hosea, that's the same.
Spur their desire.
Right. I'll make you jealous. That's
Yeah.
right. I'm going to shut this off.
In other words, what he brings out here is in 11. So I ask, have they stumbled so as to fall? In other words, are the Jews finished? They're not. They're not. But naturally, the ones disobeying, they'll never make it either, you know. But that's true of everybody, Jew and Gentile.
Right.
There's equality there, okay.
Which leads me to the next question in verse 12. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? Now, is Paul saying that he knows that a lot of Jews there's going to be...
Right. Till the fullness of the Gentiles come in, then all of that shall be saved.
So Paul knew it. He definitely knew that there would be many Jews.
Right, they would be made jealous, and they would eventually wake up. And he looks at it through jealousy, but it's naturally through the knowledge. When the true Israel, the Israel of flesh, the true Israel of flesh, sees that we are fulfilling the word of Yahweh, that they will come in.
Yeah.
So
But Paul doesn't really know when, but he just knows.
It's going to be a beautiful day when that happens. See, if their rejection means the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead? When they come back, it's something that was lost and it's alive now.
Right.
Where Israel was completely lost, all of a sudden they come to.
So will this happen in the end days too? Will when Israel's preaching, the Jews will become so to speak jealousy?
They'll be coming in.
Yeah. This is a righteous jealousy, right? This isn't the jealousy that we're accustomed to.
Right. In other words, they don't want to be left out of it.
Right. They don't want to be left out.
Right.
That's a good way to put it.
They see its value. Real riches. So we'll have witnesses coming in. We'll have others coming in.
Jews coming in.
Gentiles. We'll have Jews coming in.
Blacks from somewhere.
Everybody. Chinese.
And you know what's going to be nice? A lot of Jewish people know Hebrew. They have lots.
Yeah, they know the modern Hebrew.
Right, but at least they know something about it, so that'll be a help. It will be, you know.
I was arguing with guys in jail, a guy that studied Hebrew, you know. I said the word al means because of, and so forth. Al. He says, no, means on, upon, you know. It does mean that. But it also means other things. So he argued in there, and I had 3 lexicons there, and I brought them all out and showed them. Then they argued about another word, you know.
Just want to be right.
Again. Then I was talking to some people, he was there. They said, what do you say, Abe? I got nothing to say, he said. He gave up by that time. He saw I knew what I was talking about. But see, they know the modern Hebrew, and it's not as, I don't know, it's not as, doesn't differentiate as much as the old Hebrew. Each word has so many meanings.
They're trying to make it more like English.
Yeah.
Well, it's with all different languages, it's like that. So it's changed.
Right.
You know, I know in school when I tried learning Italian, I mean, the Italian they were teaching me in school was nothing like your Italian grandmother knew.
Oh, wow.
It was, you know, it was all real different. It's like newer. They change it.
So what she does.
16. This whole verse I really need to understand. If the dough offered as first fruits is holy, so is the whole lump. The dough offered as first fruits. And maybe if you just explain the dough, the lump, the first fruits.
Well, in the olden days, they used to, instead of putting yeast in the dough to make bread, they used to save a little bit of dough that had yeast in it. And yeast is a bacteria and grows.
Right.
So if you only have a little bit, you leave it overnight in a warm temperature, the whole pot is full of yeast. See?
Yeah.
The whole thing swells up. The whole thing is affected. See? So what he's bringing out, that little piece of dough, which was the Israel of flesh that Yahweh was using, sows the whole lump, meaning that there is righteousness in the Israel of flesh and what Yahweh did with the old law.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, when they get the full understanding, they'll prove to be holy. There's righteousness in them.
So the first fruits is the Israel of flesh,
Right.
the foundation,
Right.
the whole lump. And if the root is holy, so are the branches.
Right, it's all fed off the same one.
Mhm.
The branches are all fed from the same root.
Now, when we say branches, because it goes on to talk about the graft and the branches, the branches are the offspring, the offshoot, the later portion.
It refers to them as the members. They're less than the trunk.
They're members.
The members that make up the tree.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's a kind of a crude way to bring it out, but it's actually referring to when they fell. Some of the branches fell when they.
What do you mean?
Rewind the tape all the way to the beginning. Fruit
That they're fed by.
they're fed by, meaning the foundation, the original instruction, or how do you?
Well, the original tree was Israel, and the root is Israel.
Yeah.
See? So branches fell off, and Gentiles were grafted in to replace those that fell off.
Yeah.
So he tells them, don't forget that the roots are still Israel.
Mm-hmm.
See? So don't feel that you're better than Israel, because your way is no respect for persons. So actually, the Israel, he's got the advantage in a way.
Right. Right.
Because he had the truth from the beginning, and all the promises that Yahweh made, all of a sudden he's going to see they're fulfilled, and they're going to be a tremendous force when they come in.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous, and they're intelligent too.
What about Israel and Palestine? It'll reach there? Do you think anything
It'll
there?
reach there, but that is a demonized place.
Yeah.
Most of them don't believe in anything; they just believe in fighting.
Yeah.
And they're rabbis. There is a rabbi over there I hear that's saying that this is the Israel of Satan.
Really?
Oh, he's really against it. This is not the Israel of God.
So maybe it will spur some
Absolutely,
righteousness there.
absolutely. It's got to. They can see that that's no fulfillment. Anybody that studies the Bible can see that that's no fulfillment.
Yeah.
The only reason they're going ahead is because they ignore the Bible. Okay? All they tell them is that this land is ours. They
Right.
promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
So they have no understanding. They probably have their religion there is just tradition,
That's
of no understanding.
They make their own way.
Yeah.
That's all they're doing.
I was wondering, Paul's writing to the Romans. Was there a problem there? Evidently, there was. Maybe people were becoming or picking on the Jews, or boasting, or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah, that always happens. In fact, through the Middle Ages, the Jew was accursed. All the Christians were looking down on them.
Yeah.
The Jews were picked on. Oh, they were driven from city to city. Their houses were burned.
During when? The Middle
In
Ages?
the Middle Ages, yeah. And still there's anti-Semitism.
Right.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So we hated. They used to call them Christ killers. And they used to kill them, burn them at the stake, and do everything, you know. So they were against them. And what did the Jew do? He just didn't accept the Messiah. But the way the Christians accepted, they didn't accept him either. They didn't deserve the burnings. The Christians were worse.
Yeah.
What the popes did, my goodness, it's worse than what the Jews ever did. They destroyed whole people.
Right.
Invaded them, you know, with the Crusades. So you were bringing out whether they were against them. Yes, they were against them.
So there was a
they
start.
took advantage. They took advantage. Says, we accept them, you don't. See,
Yeah.
we got the Bible. Well, they're not real Israel. Yeah. So anybody who started to brag, boast, Paul corrected them.
Right.
So there must have been that air going on there, that attitude.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. In verse 20, this is true, they were broken off because of their unbelief, but you stand fast only through faith. So do not become proud, but stand in awe. Now, their unbelief, primarily because of Yahshua, their unbelief in Yahshua, or the changeover of the covenant, and but you stand fast only through faith. Meaning, how do you explain that?
They have no
Only
blessings
through
of any
faith.
kind. They're not a chosen people or anything. They're only there because they believe.
Right.
The minute they stop believing, they're out. So they really don't have a big hold on there.
Yeah. A lesser hold than, say, the Israel of the flesh because they had so much more instruction, meaning that
In
it's...
a way, he started out with them. They're the foundation. you only believe what Yahweh did with Israel.
Right. That's
You're
true.
coming in. He didn't do it with you, he did it with them. See? So all you, of course, faith will do it. If they have the faith, they'll make it.
Right.
But that's all they got. They got no history of anything.
So Paul's definitely meaning it like that. Like you have less than they have, so it's only through faith that you.
Yeah, in a way they're equal.
They're
But
equal.
really, Yahweh dealt with Israel. They're the foundation. He dealt with Israel alone. I didn't deal with anybody else.
Now that's really all I got up to. I'm still saying this is a pretty long study.
Well, you come back again.
Yeah, I will. This is a hard study for me. You know, the prophecy studies are easier to me. These ones are, this type of study.
But I know it
harder.
is difficult. Yeah, but you got to get through everything.
Yeah.
Because you're going to do this with Christians, especially.
That's why I forced myself to take it, because it's one that's not easy for me. So.
Well, not only is it not easy, because you're going to meet this with Christians, and if you find a sincere Christian and you are able to answer these things and make sense to him,
Yeah.
he'll come in.
That's good.
The only real Christians that we got in was Kenny and Jane. They were real Christians,
Right.
Mhm.
and they came in.
Yeah.
But we had a problem with them,
Yeah.
especially with Kenny. You know, he used to argue something else.
Right. Right. That's right. I'm going to have a study.